What's up guys, and welcome back to another Scary Stories video. For today's video, I found a post on Ask Reddit asking for people's creepiest experiences that they can't explain. And I saw some really interesting stories in the comments. But of course, if you like hearing scary stories, I upload these twice a week, so consider subscribing so you don't miss a future upload. And with that, I hope you enjoy today's video. Serious. What is the creepiest or most unexplained thing that's happened to you that you still think about to this day? When I was 13, I moved into my brother's bedroom, as it's an extension to the original house with an ensuite and is far larger than my old room. Originally, it was a tiny box room with the entrance to the attic, but it was extended outwards. The attic entrance is always open, with a permanent set of metal ladders angled up into it. There's a picture of it. The gray arch is where the original room ended. Within a few weeks of moving in, I'd wake up in the middle of the night to see a figure staring down at me, with a white head-like skull and formless black body. It would slowly move down to the foot of my bed and stare at me until I moved, at which point it would sink into the floor. Just sleep paralysis, right? And I'd begged to move into the room and had just got it set up so I wasn't gonna leave. I didn't really talk about it to anyone. It gradually became less frequent over time. 8 years after this, my brother mentioned at a get-together that he used to have a sleep paralysis demon when he lived in that room, in a half-joking, half-freaked out way to other people when the topic of them came up. He described the exact same thing. Neither of us mentioned it to anybody else at the time it was happening, so we have no explanation for both of us experiencing the same thing. Was delivering newspapers on my paper route when a longtime customer pulled his car next to me and asked me to just give him his daily newspaper now because he was going on a long trip. I handed him his newspaper, then skipped his house as I continued my route. He used to have to go collect the money back then, no internet payment yet, and I went to his house to collect my fee. His wife answers and promptly complains that I missed her house on my deliveries the day before. I explained to her that her husband pulled up next to me. I told her what he said and that I gave him the paper. She started crying, told me that he had died a couple weeks ago, and it was obviously not possible that I spoke with her husband the day before. I know what I saw, and nearly 30 years later I still think about that situation. I have no way to logically explain what happened, and it still gives me the creeps. A ghost saved my life in a haunted old Shakespearean theater by telling me that a plank that edged along the wall, which was the only way to get to the furthest corner of the building, 60 feet above the stage, was missing a section, and warned me that I would die. 1985. I had worked there all summer when I was 17, and had never seen this guy before. I landed a cool job as a stage operations crew the summer after high school, and worked the upper theater high above the stage on the catwalks. I was working in a far corner of a theater's rafters through my lunch break, so I could leave early that day, and was asked to walk off the catwalk, cross a wooden plank, and drop a rope down, and pull a larger rope to tie off on the rafters. We were getting ready for the season, and slowly stringing lights and scenery to the drops that were bars on pulleys and counterweights. As I left the decently made catwalk, I stepped onto a plank and couldn't see in the middle of the building, but could see a plank rising upward on the other side of the darkness. Okay, it must hit a platform there at the bottom and go up again, I thought. I walked 4 or 5 steps down into a very dimly lit part of the rafters on the plank when a man stopped me. Turn around slowly. The plank is missing. No light. Get light. Fine, I said in a sarcastic teenage voice. I turned around and got back on the catwalk, walked to the ladder, and climbed down to the stage to get a flashlight. My boss asked, "Why are you down here?" "I need a light, and your guy said a plank was missing and to get a light." "What guy? You were the only one up there." "The old guy with the beard and wool cap." My boss, who headed the technical, carpenter, electrical part of the theater, was in his late 60s, and had worked in that theater for nearly 40 years. He looked amused at first, laughing at me, asking, "How'd you know about that?" "Know about what?" "I came down for a flashlight so I could see." "You're serious? You saw him?" "It must have been 1954, and a rigging staff fell from the rafters and died. He fell all the way to the stage. I think his name was John. In 74, my assistant made up a story about talking to him, but back then we were all smoking something. What are you on?" "Nothing. Come with me and let's see if it's missing." So we did. Sure enough, the plank was missing. There was the plank I was on, a platform, nothing, and a platform with a plank from that platform to the upper corner of the building. From my vantage point, it looked like plank, platform, plank, platform, plank. In the dust along the plank were my footprints leading right to the edge. One more step and I would have fallen to the stage. Below us was a thick fabric curtain that separated the stage from the rafters, blocking light from below, and the horizontal folds of the curtain a wool cap. To this day, I have not stepped back into that theater. Driving from Northern California to Southern California through the middle of the night about a decade ago. I was tired, and the scenery along the freeway through the Central Valley isn't very interesting. I remember passing an old silo, looking at my car clock, and it was 3:17 in the morning. Drove some more, passed a power line, and it was 3:21. I blinked, shuffled in my seat, and passed that same old silo, and it was back to 3:17. I was in disbelief. I just stared at my clock for a few moments. Drove a little bit more, passed the same power line, 3:21. Don't know why or how, well, but I went backwards about 4 minutes. Never experienced anything similar or since. When I was in 3rd grade, I moved to a new town and into a new house. We lived in a camper in the backyard of the house while we renovated it. It was a pretty old house. Anyway, during renovation, we found all sorts of stuff in the walls. Old bottles, old pair of glasses, letters, old newspapers, old pictures of children in school clothes. It was a 2-story house and the stairs were kind of a focal point for all sorts of creepy stuff. So once you got to the top of the stairs, there was a little landing before it went into 2 bedrooms. At night, we would always leave the light on in the landing in case we had to get up to use the bathroom. Me and one brother shared a room and the other room was for our older brother. I refused to sleep upstairs due to how creeped out I was, so I always slept downstairs on the couch. One weekend, my sister, who's older than both my brothers, came to visit and was in my oldest brother's bedroom alone, as we were all at school and my mom was at work. As she was sitting up there watching TV, she heard footsteps coming up the stairs and called out, as she thought my mom was home early from work. No response other than the footsteps turning around and heading back down the stairs. When she got up to look, there was no one home and all doors locked. It doesn't stop there. My brother was left home alone for a week while me and my other brother and mom and dad went on a week-long vacation. Naturally, he had his girlfriend over for a couple nights to keep him company. One night, she got up to pee around 3 a.m. and went downstairs to the bathroom where she said she heard children whispering. A couple nights later, around 4 a.m., the girlfriend woke my brother saying someone was in the house. They heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Since the light was on in the landing, they could see a shadow underneath the door like someone was standing there, and the doorknob began to shake. Luckily, it was locked. They both started to freak out, and my brother jumped up out of bed. We had some of those dumb display samurai type swords that aren't even sharp, and he grabbed one of those and went towards the door. They heard more footsteps running down the stairs, and he bravely or stupidly followed down the stairs where he was met with an empty house. All windows and doors closed and locked. He called the police, but nothing came of it. My husband recently took an overnights job to help us out during COVID. He's only been there about 2 weeks and works evenings/overnights, 9 p.m., 6 a.m. Last night was no different. He left home around 8:15 p.m. Our daughter, age 11, and I decided to make it a movie night. Around 11 p.m., I heard keys in my back door and the usual sounds my husband makes when he comes home. I creep out to the kitchen to make sure it was him, and it was. He told me he needed to grab his knee compression sleeve, walks down the hall, says hi to our daughter as he passes the living room, and goes upstairs. He comes back down, gave me a kiss, and left again. We finished our movie and went to bed. In the morning when he got home, I made a joking comment about him forgetting his knee sleeve. He was genuinely confused as I recalled the previous night. Our daughter confirmed everything I said and he was still acting confused. I pulled up our security motion camera on my phone to show him when he popped in quick, but there was no footage from the night before or any other night of him coming home after he's left for work. My daughter and I both heard him, saw him, and I touched him, but he was never home during that time. Nothing else out of the ordinary happened that night. We seriously have no idea what happened. Not my story, but a friend from college. A house her family lived in for a while when she was a kid had an attic that ran the length of the house, and the access was through a door in the back of her brother's closet at the far end. Their parents forbid them from messing around up there because it was filled with boxes from previous tenants. Landlord said, "I don't care if you look through them, but I don't know what's in there, so do so at your own risk." And because if someone got hurt by something falling on them or something, it might go unheard or unnoticed until too late. To make things weirder, at the very back end of the attic, so right above her bedroom, was a little locked room. Well, friend starts getting woken up at night by the sound of someone moving around quietly, which always turns into rapid, quiet creaking almost right above her. She figures it's her brother, because he'd have to cross over their parents' room as well. She figured he'd get caught eventually, and just did her best to ignore the sound or think about what a teenage boy might be doing to cause it. One day during the summer, she slept in on a weekend. When she woke up, she looked outside and saw her parents working on the big produce garden they put in. She went and got some breakfast, then went back up to her room to play with her Game Boy. For the first time after months of getting woken up, she heard the noises during the day. Curious to catch him in the act, she crept to her brother's room. The closet door was open. The attic access was open. She quietly went up to the steep and narrow stairs until she could just peek in, and saw first that the path had been cleared, and that the mattress her dad had wedged in front of the little room had been slid aside. More surprising, however, was that the locked door at the back was ajar. Her brother stuck his head out, saw her right away, and smiled, calling her over. "You gotta come see this," and then pulled back inside of the dark room. She said that the only other time she'd ever felt so instantly, totally, instinctually afraid was her first time hearing a cougar scream at night in the woods. She instantly noped and flew all the way downstairs into the yard to tattle on her brother, only to see him hauling stuff around and helping their parents, as he'd been all morning and afternoon, apparently. Shocked and afraid of not being believed, even they asked why she looked so afraid. She simply answered, "I think there's someone in the attic." When pressed, she said she heard footsteps and saw that the door was open, and she went to look. Dad swore and went and got his gun from his truck and instructed them to wait 15 minutes. If he didn't come back out, they were all to get in the truck and drive to the neighbor's place a couple miles down and call the police. No cell phones back then. He went in, and after a very anxious wait, came back out pissed as hell. Damien and the kids fess up who had been messing around up there. Both denied it, and the family went to look as a unit, with friend reluctantly bringing up the rear. Someone had indeed pushed all the boxes and the mattress out of the way. The door was indeed unlocked and open. All that was inside, no light, no window, was an old rocking chair, and everything covered in decades of dust, with no sign that anyone but them had been in the room at all. No streaks, no footprints, just some ancient mouse shit in an old chair. Brother pointed to this as proof he couldn't have been the one, because how would he leave no signs? In the absence of other explanations, Dad didn't buy it. Brother got grounded for the next couple weeks for breaking the rules and sneaking around, and friend refused to go back to the attic for the rest of the time they lived there, sleeping on the couch in the downstairs living room when she could get away with it, because the sound of steps and the rocking would still regularly wake her up. She told this story at a couple gatherings as an answer to similar scariest thing to happen to you prompts, but details left out included some eerie notes. Well into adulthood, years and years after they moved away, she still has recurring nightmares about that attic. It's always the same dream, but it goes one of two ways. In the dream, it's like she's on a rail, and no matter how she tries to stop, go backwards, etc., she just smoothly glides along, up the stairs, down the hall, into her brother's room, up the attic steps, unable to close her eyes or turn away. The way it usually goes is that she's frozen at the point right where she can see into the attic, and the door to the little room is open. Her brother's smiling face emerges, but she knows in her heart it's not him. The not brother grins and beckons, and the attic gets shorter and shorter, her unable to turn or run away, until she is just within an arm's reach. And just as he lunges for her, she wakes up drenched in a cold sweat and crying. The other way it goes, it's the same all the way until the attic, but then when her brother's face peeks out, she knows it is him. In this version though, he's covered in thick dust, his hair, his skin, etc., except that tears have streaked his face. He calls out to her but makes no noise. She can't understand what he's saying except for two words: "Help me." Then something pulls him back inside, and she's frozen, knowing in her gut that something terrible is happening to him, but she can't save him. This goes on until she wakes up racked with guilt and fear. I met her brother at a barbecue and asked him about the house and the little room. Apparently he never heard her side of the story. I didn't tell him details. He swore he never went up there for fear of spiders, and was pissed he was grounded but innocent, because it meant missing out on some summer stuff he and friends had planned. He always assumed it was a prank by his sister where she panicked and lied when their dad reacted all serious and got his gun. I asked him if he remembered anything weird about the house, and he said the only thing he thought was weird was that he'd wake up knowing he dreamt, but not remember the dreams at all. Said it was only weird because he doesn't normally have a sense of dreaming at all before or after that house. But while they were there, the feeling happened all the time. Otherwise, had only good or neutral memories from there. I never got the impression she was lying. Always scared me hearing the story because, assuming all details are correct, there's too many big questions. What was she hearing at night? Why was the door open to the attic? Who moved all the boxes? How did the little room unlock when none of them had the key? If someone had gone in or come out? How are there no marks in the dust? And most importantly, if that wasn't her brother, what did she see up there? A few years ago, I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with my kids, who were 8 and 10 at the time. My kids slept in a bunk bed, and when we first moved in, they would fight over who got the top bunk, and my youngest usually won. Their room had a sliding glass door that led to our balcony, which overlooked some woods. They had thick blinds that were always closed at night, and nobody else shared the balcony with us. We also lived in a very safe, nice part of town with nice older neighbors. One night, I took my kids in for the night, read them a few stories, and they're falling asleep. I kissed them goodnight on their noggins and go to bed myself in the room room right next to theirs. About an hour later, my youngest screams bloody murder and I hear a crash in their room. I jump up, running into their room, thinking youngest must have somehow wiggled his way out of the top bunk. Sure enough, he's on the ground, head down and still screaming. I try to calm him down and ask if he's okay, thinking we definitely need to go to the ER. He looks up at me, grabs onto me, and screams for me to take him out of there. So I go to the bathroom, which is right across the hall, and turn on all the lights to check him for injuries. Long story short, he's fine. Turns out he jumped from the top bunk and landed fine. I ask him why in the world he did that, and he finally blurts out, "To get away from the lady on the ceiling with the backwards head." My oldest was woken up by this point and was super annoyed at little bro and told him that there was nothing to be afraid of. I finally calm him down, but from that night forward, he absolutely refused to sleep in that room and insisted on going to bed with me, which I was okay with, but I did try to talk him into sleeping in his own comfy bed. Older bro even offered to let him take the bottom bunk permanently, but he wouldn't budge. A month goes by and my eldest still sleeps on the top bunk. One night he wakes us up by jumping off the top bunk and rushing into my bedroom and jumping in the bed with me and little bro. I ask him what's up and he refuses to talk about it. I figure he must have watched a scary video or something that he shouldn't have at his cousin's house earlier and just pat him on the back and tell him everything is okay and he's safe with me. So all three of us guys are sleeping in my bed every night, and I try my best to get them to go back to bed in their bunks, and even go so far as to buy them cool tents that go over the tops of their beds with flashlights and comics. They love them and spend their time in there, but only while it's still light outside. I even buy them 2 pet mice with a nice big cage, thinking that having other living creatures in the room with them would be comforting. They love animals, but it doesn't work. My oldest finally tells me he saw a shadow crawling on the ceiling that looked like a woman with long black hair. He said that he was woken up by a flashing white light and thought his brother was turning his flashlight on and off and on again. But when he looked closer, it was coming from the closet, and he saw the black figure crawling on the ceiling and fucking noped out of there. I was like, great, 2 kids who are scared of a monster in the closet. I talked to other parents and my ex, and we all tried to reassure them that they're safe, and there's no such thing as monsters. My ex and I were about to take them to a therapist. We were concerned there might be something more going on with them. Well, a few nights later, on a Friday night or Saturday morning around 3 a.m., the boys are asleep in my bed, oldest in the middle, youngest on the far left next to my bedroom window, and I was on the far right facing the open bedroom door. Normally we would close the bedroom door, but we just had an epic Nerf gun fight before going to bed, and all the doors were open. It was a great night. Anyway, I'm laying in bed, snoring when I suddenly wake up. I open my eyes, and as they're trying to focus, I notice a white flashing light reflecting on the wall outside my bedroom. I think it must be one of their flashlights losing its battery power or something, and debate on whether I really want to get out of bed and turn it off, or just roll over and ignore it when I see the source of the light slowly moving down the hall, getting closer to my bedroom door. I immediately thought, intruder, and quietly got out of bed and crept toward the doorway, trying to see what was going on. I peek out into the hallway and the light is flashing close to the ground from my kids' room. I don't hear footsteps, nothing. I look in their room and the light stops. I'm freaked out, so I flip on the light switch and see nothing. Mice are chilling, nothing out of place, and I went over their entire floor looking for the source of that light and found nothing. We ended up moving out a couple months later, and the boys got separate bedrooms and weren't afraid anymore. My oldest is 15 now, and I told him this story back in January and he turned white as a ghost. Went silent and just stared at me. I was like, "What's the matter, kid?" He looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're lucky you didn't look up." This story is from a childhood friend who told me this, and it still unnerves me to this day. She was genuinely freaked out, and her family even backed up her claims, so here goes. Basically, my friend and her family moved into this rental property, which my friend said was haunted. It gave everyone an off feeling. Those who visited or stayed over would mention it. I myself experienced this odd feeling of foreboding whenever I went over there, and believed in the consensus that the house was haunted. It honestly felt oppressive in the house. You would feel this pitiful dread that's hard to compute into words, and was extremely uncomfortable to experience, to say the least. Anyway, this particular inexplicable event that is the basis of this post was enough for my family's friend to pack up and stay with relatives until he moved out permanently. On this fateful afternoon, my friend had arrived back home from the park and heard an argument taking place in the kitchen between her mom and dad. My friend thought this was odd, as both her parents should be at work, so she called out, "Mom?" before unlocking the front door and going inside. My friend said the house fell instantly silent. An uncanny silence, like all the air had been sucked out of the place, voice and felt stifling and wrong. Then her mom said, "Hey, friend's name, we're just in here." My friend was just outside the closed kitchen door at this point and froze beyond opening. It was her mother's voice, but there was something off, like the cadence was missing that made it her mother. It sounded flat and unnatural. My friend decided to bolt back out the front door and wait outside until her brother came home, but she said as she turned back to the house, she saw her mother peering at her from the lounge room window, but it wasn't her mother. The face was the same. Everything was the same, but her face was devoid of anything that made it her mother. There was no recognition on her mother's face. There was no indication that she was looking directly at her daughter. There was no emotion in the expression. Nothing. The eyes looked unstaring and utterly blank. My friend screamed and ran down the street to her mother's work and confirmed that she was there all this time and had never been home. Initially, my friend's mother reasoned that someone must have broke in, but a later investigation proved nothing had been stolen and the back door was locked, as was the front door when my friend came home. No one could rationalize who my friend saw in the window and why it looked so much like her mother, but not fully human. So that was the deciding factor to nope the fuck out of there and find somewhere else to live. The landlord of the house denied anything like this happening when they lived there, but did admit tenants didn't stay long, saying there was something wrong in the house. My friend also told me she was the only one who actually saw anything definitively sinister in the house, but her family said they definitely felt an evil presence there, which ultimately manifested into the doppelganger experience my friend had. Utterly terrifying. And that concludes today's video, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure to subscribe because I upload these videos twice a week, and comment down below what stories or topics you'd like to see me talk about in the next video. Until next time, I'm Damien Lee, and take care.